Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of Lunch with Lindsay. So this one's a little bit different because this actually was born out of a conversation I was having about my last episode, which was with NBA star Chris Paul. So to recap, I was talking to Chris about his book 61 that just came out. It's about his life as an NBA player, also though about his family growing up, about his life as a father, a son, a grandson, a husband, all the things. And he kept in his conversation about it making me think about my husband and the book he wrote 2 years ago called Pops, which is about his father's battle with addiction, but also stories of his growing up along the way. And there was a lot that intersected. And so I found myself talking to Melvin about this. And then after we were discussing some things, I thought, you know what? There are some really important nuggets in here I would love to share with you guys. So I convinced my husband, Craig Melvin, to go downstairs and hang out in one of his favorite spots in our house, our booth, and talk a little bit about what he's learned in the years since he wrote his book, what it's been like for him since his father has now passed the threshold of 5 years sober. And I hope that there's a lot that you can learn from this conversation. So here it is. Sit back. I hope you enjoy our talk.
One of the things that I think we both have in common, and you grow up a certain way, and one of two things happens. The example you see is the example that you decide you're going to follow, or the example you see, you're like, oh, I don't want to be anything like that. I don't know what I want to be, what I want to do, but I don't want to go this way. I've seen this way. I'm going this way. And I think we both had that experience to a certain extent. And so, my dad, we had a complicated relationship for a long time, but we wouldn't be sitting in this booth and we wouldn't be together. And had it not probably been for the example that I saw, you can be,
Really? What do you mean?
Well, because you can be more motivated, I think, and this is my opinion, but I think you can be, or certainly just as motivated by negative examples as you are by positive examples.
Yeah.
I think it's probably easier. Like if you have a positive example to say, okay, I want to emulate that. And I hope that's what I'm doing for our kids and what you're doing. But even negative examples, like you can see something and think to yourself, I don't know how I want my journey to go, but this is not who I want to be. And I think for Chris, to a certain extent, there was some of that, but there is also this innate magnetic North Star like draw to family, which keeps you grounded. And I think that's one of the things that's always helped him resonate with lots of people.
Also, with that, what became really clear over the course of the conversations, especially when we were sitting at Wake Forest, was he kept saying, because he was home, he's like, I don't get to be here enough. And it was like everyone was singing his praises and saying, you're ours, you're ours. But he was like, and he was torn up about it. And he said that, but you could also feel it off of him. It was the thing that upsets him and he actually said, having this dream, living out my dream, doing what I dreamt as a kid, he realizes, and it's a living example of the sacrifice that you make to be able to be lucky enough to do it, which for him is not being able to be home enough.
But even beyond that, like when you go home, you realize that what you're doing and who you are, it's not, it's not about you. It's not even about your family. It's about all these other people who have invested emotionally in you. They've invested time in you, and they see. I had a FaceTime with a couple on Friday. I'd gone to school. Her name's Marcy. Her maiden name was Marcy Squirewell, and her youngest son, or her middle son, wants to be a journalist, and she reached out and she wanted to come up, and she brought the 3 boys and her husband up from Florida, and I hadn't seen her in, I don't remember when, but like we grew up together, elementary school. Her son's there in my dressing room, And I've got a weird memory, and I remember vividly her parents' names.
Weird memory meaning what? Photographic?
Not photographic, but I think my memories probably served me well professionally to a certain extent. Long term, short term, I've got no memory. But anyway, her parents. I remember their parents' names, and I was like, "Oh yeah, how's your mom doing? How's the life she doing?" Blah blah blah. Anyway, she was telling me about her mom and how she read the book and how proud they were and blah blah. Not blah blah blah, but and I said to her offhand, I said, "Well, we should call him. Let's FaceTime him in." She FaceTime him, and mom pops up, and I kind of grew up with knowing her mom and her older sister Tanya, and her mom and her dad Elijah. They were, talking about how proud they were of any modicum of professional success maybe I've had. And we went down memory lane, and I said afterwards to my assistant, I said, I'm talking like I'm talking to an audience. I said to Bailey. I said to Bailey.
Bailey,
I was like,
assistant.
I said, you forget sometimes. The longer you do it, the less it becomes about you. Like it's about all these people who, for a variety of reasons, they see themselves in you, they look up to you, they remember you from when, they're all these different groups. And the longer you do something, the larger those groups become. And people will come to the plaza now. There's a group this morning from Colombia, Irmo. It was a group of 5, 3 generations. They were celebrating their grandmother's 80th birthday. And the grandmother said to me, she's like, "Oh, Craig, I used to watch you and you at WIS." And the mom said, "Oh, and you went to college with my friend, blah, blah, blah." And the daughter's like, "I remember when you did Craig." And you hear stories like that sometimes, and I don't know, like for me at least, you start to realize it's not about like me. It's about all the things you come to represent for so many different people. The pressure you mentioned is, and what's funny about pressure, and I think Chris, and others I talked to Sean White this morning on the show.
The Olympian?
The
Olympic snowboarder. Sean White.
Who said to me, he's like, "The last time I saw you, you almost passed out."
Why?
I was in Denver. I landed really fast.
That's right.
And I got the air sickness.
That's right.
But I'm so not to toot my own horn, but I'm in this documentary that on Max. I forget which episode. And it was awkward because he asked me if I'd seen myself in the doc, and I hadn't seen the full doc. But it's 4 parts. Who has time to watch all 4? Anyway,
okay, that's okay. But you should make time to watch it.
But he was talking about like pressure, and how it's weird, I think, for people to talk about pressure, because like if you feel pressure, like especially I'm talking professionally here, not personally. If you feel like professional pressure, typically it's because you've been blessed with a lot. You've been blessed with opportunity, championship, success, whatever. Prestige. You've been blessed with, and no one wants to hear anyone whine about how hard it is or how much you feel like you. No one wants to hear that.
Right.
I think it's changed a little bit, but I think that's what makes it really hard for a lot of people. Like it's
I think that's why I'm so drawn to the backstory of people, because, and I think you're like this too, because, okay, covering the NFL, people say that all the time. "Oh, really? That guy is paid blah, blah, blah millions of dollars to do that. Give me a break." But using the Chris Paul story as an example, he's never won a championship, as you know. And so he's always the good soldier, always the best leader on the team. He made some comment about he's always the guy that is in the huddle before the 4th quarter. But that's the one thing that doesn't let him sleep, is that he hasn't
keeps
achieved.
him going. Keeps him going.
Keeps him motivated. And there's a lot to that. What keeps you going?
Well, part of what I just said in terms of not wanting to let other people down. I think it's funny because I think what keeps you going should change as you get older. When I was younger, when I was in my 20s, it was like, You know, I want to be successful. You know, I want prestige. I want money. I want like worldly success. And then you get older and you realize, okay, well, those things are temporary.
Yeah.
And then you get to an age where, you know, for me, part of it was faith, and you know, I want to live the life that, you know, on Judgment Day when I see St. Peter, he's like, oh, Craig, I've been waiting on you. Come on in. And you get to an age, hopefully, where you're like, you know what, I want a family. I want a wife. I want kids. I want to feel that richness and fullness. And then you get that and you're like, oh my God, I want to make them proud. I think people, and it's funny because the longer I interview people who've achieved worldly success, the more I realize one of the common threads is people who achieve great things, they don't do it for themselves. They're not like trying to like make money and be successful and like be an influencer and get a bunch of followers. They find something that they really love, they're really good at, and if they're lucky enough or they're blessed enough, they can like live for other people. They can, but
like serve other people.
You can serve other people. You can be an example for other people. But that's what has to motivate you. For me, like if you're motivated, and you see people like this from time to time. Like if you're motivated by all the bullshit that a lot of people, like fame and notoriety and or even infamy and money and all, if that's what's like driving you, then it's like you'll achieve something. You'll get, but you'll plummet.
Are there
like there's no longevity to it. Like the people that I know, it's like people who find their thing, they do it, it drives them. In the professional lane, in the personal lane, they get lucky or blessed enough, then they're like, you know what? Oh, wait a minute. I've got people that look up to me. I need to be an example for them. I've got kids. I've got I got all these. I got parents. I got all these people, and that drives you. And if that's what's driving you, I just think that is so much that's so much more motivating than the other cheap, false plastic things. Does that make sense? I don't know.
It does, but I think sometimes you don't know. Sometimes those cheap, false things start to peel away so that you're understanding. I don't know that we're capable of understanding what the thing is when we're in our 20s. Maybe I'm
You're
wrong,
right. No,
but I've thought about most
people.
But I think there's a through line for sure. I think there. I remember board games or toys that I had as a kid. It's gonna sound so weird, but that lit me up. And one of them was some sort of like basketball game or something that you played, like getting hoops in. And there's something about that. And there was also this thing that was like a dollhouse where you turn it around in a circle.
I don't know.
No, you don't know that.
No.
But sometimes I think about that because I'm like, that's like a television set, right? Or the like there are things that I think speak to you along the way, and that might sound like really nutty, but I believe it. And I think for me, which is what I wanted to also ask you, is like, is there a thing that you do now in what you're doing for work that lights you up, that has maybe been something that you now realize was a constant? Because I think for me, maybe it's a certain part of the interviewing process. Like when I'm engaged in a certain conversation and there's, you know, when we're connecting about something, I think that connection for me is what drives me to want to do what you're talking about. And I didn't realize that before. There are a lot of elements that I love about the different types of jobs that I've had, but I think that's kind of the thing that is the through line. Do you have a through line?
I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
like what is the thing that is the most satisfying moment of what you do? And has that shown itself through different times of your
Oh yeah.
life?
No. The through line is, for me, and I think for you too. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons that we work. There's always been a legitimate intellectual curiosity. And sometimes not even intellectual. Sometimes it's just naked curiosity. Like I'm interested in lots of different things and people and ideas and so I just kind of found a job that lets me satisfy that. Like I get to, whether, you're interviewing like heads of state and, tomorrow I'm going to New Jersey to do a story on some brewery. And then, last week I'm doing a story on a cemetery down in Virginia where they unearthed the remains of 63 people that were buried before the United States was even a country. And all that like appeals to me. So I guess the through line is ADHD. Maybe it's like I'm just out here, I'm there, and
shiny objects. That's what you get upset with me about.
Well, my shiny objects are professional.
It's actually my woo.
But mine are professional, and sometimes yours are personal, and that's a different podcast and YouTube series. But
scavenger hunts and things that make.
But it's lots of different interests, like sports, and I think the through line, honestly, I have always been fascinated by like ordinary people. No, I'm not talking about actors and athletes, and I'm not talking about like famous. I'm talking like ordinary people who do extraordinary things. And who do those extraordinary things sometimes under the greatest of challenges, and they overcome obstacles, and the circumstances are just remarkable. But those are the kinds of stories that I've always been drawn to. And I'm not gonna preach about like our cultural obsession with celebrity and how that's potentially led to the demise of modern democracy as we know it. This isn't the place for that. But I do think that as a society, if we celebrated regular folks who do extraordinary things.
I have an idea. You should do that series, but you know what it should be called?
Sure. What is it called?
Capital extra hyphen. No, lowercase extra hyphen capital ordinary. Get it? Extra ordinary.
Okay.
Emma likes it.
Emma's behind. She's behind the camera. She's running audio, and she didn't sign up for any of this. And video.
But it's good.
But I would tell you, not to sound whatever. I have 3 jobs now. I can't sign up for another.
We could do that together. No, I'm kidding. But I think I love what you're saying. I think that you're.
But that's what I mean. Not to take it back to Chris or my book or anything, but if you look at Chris Paul's book, if you look at my story, like it's I celebrate my father because he was an ordinary guy. He's not dead. He is an ordinary guy who overcame extraordinary circumstances I could not fully appreciate until I was older. You look at Chris Paul. Chris overcame some pretty extraordinary circumstances, and he achieved. And I would maintain that if you take a look at people who've achieved, again, by our worldly standards, people who've achieved, most of them, and there are obvious exceptions, most of them have overcome something. And oftentimes it's something extraordinary. And sometimes you know about it, a lot of times you don't. But people who are driven in a bizarre way, they're driven that way because that's all they've known. Because, for me, my dad was getting up, working 3rd shift, 30 years, 2/3 of the time he was doing it drunk. He didn't go to college. He didn't know where his father was until he was 13. And he got 3 kids through school. And there was never an expectation that we wouldn't go.
But and now he is a dedicated, devoted grandfather and father. And it's not that he wasn't before, because what I remember is when we were first married and our son turned 1, you could see the man who was trying to be the man he wanted to be, but was truly fighting those demons and could not do it. Couldn't do it until you guys decided that you were going to take one more shot. And so that's not lost on me. And I think that's that's why your book is Pops is so powerful. But
I'm not trying to sell any books.
I'm not. I know you're not. But that's your story, and I think that.
But Chris, I mean, Chris was hanging out with his grandfather.
So, right.
And then the next day, he
Chris,
gets killed.
For context, Chris...
I hope I didn't give away too much of the book.
No, but one of the most, this is what, it's I mean, it's everywhere about the book to get people to read it, which is why they should. But the day that he signed at Wake Forest, that night, he's with his grandfather, one of his most important people in his life. And the very next day, he was murdered. And so, but what I thought about when I was reading that part was, Chris is thinking about the devastation. What he might not be thinking about is also what a gift he gave his grandfather the day before, right? Like, I know that sounds morbid, but that's very true.
I would take it a step further. Not the gift that that he just gave his grandfather. I would maintain that, as morbid and macabre as this may sound, that murder, that wasn't a gift, and that's not the way.
Right.
But it motivated him. Like, it drove him. Like, it became, like, it becomes, like, you have to have something that drives you. You have to have something that's getting you out of bed. That's, like, you gotta have something that's guttural. And I think one of the things now, with, like, not to sound like the old man on the porch waving his fist, you know, a lot of the things that drive people, it's material, it's like, you know, clicks and likes and follows and all that crap. And it's not like, I want to make my grandfather proud. I want to make my father proud. I want to make my kids proud. I want to make my wife proud. I want to live the kind of life that when my grandchildren log onto the internet 30 years from now, they're like, oh my God, that's granddad. Oh my God, and that's, and if that becomes your mindset, you live differently.
So since you're talking about that, what is it like for you when you are now with your dad?
Oh my God. Well,
at a family event, at the beach, wherever.
It's a different relationship. At first it was off-putting because I didn't recognize them. You know, it's like, who is it? Well, no, because if you've known someone to be one way for 40 or 50 years and all of a sudden they're always sober and they're always present and sometimes they're the only person. So at first it was off-putting, and then after, I'd say maybe a year and a half, you come to realize through conversation and through observation more than conversation. Here's a man who's living the life that he wanted to live for decades, and he wasn't capable of it. And now he is. And you can marvel in watching that. And you watch him with, you know, not just our kids, but with his other four, and he's the kind of grandfather that you wanted him to be as a father. And you're, at first it's, you know, if we're being honest, at first it was like, well, this sucks, you know, like it was 60.
Because you didn't.
Yeah, I didn't get that. And then you're like, you know what? Here's God doing his thing again, giving us something, not just for us to enjoy, but to demonstrate and prove that it's never too late. That you can't give up on someone. And we're not talking like 5 years or 10 years. We're talking a legit 40 years of addiction, emotional absence, verbal abuse sometimes. Like, we're talking all this stuff. And you write someone off, and just when you're ready to give up on them, you know, someone plants a seed and they're like, you know what? Hey, here's your chance. Here's another chance. Don't, just seize on it. And you seize on it, and then, and so my dad, when he and I have talked about this, and I've said to him before, I was like, you know, you'll be long gone, but people will come to appreciate the example that you've set in your 60s and 70s. There is not a 3-day period that passes. There's a woman that came up to me today on the plaza. She's like, I read your book. And I had an aunt who was like people who come up and want to talk about like their addiction story, or a loved one that they lost, or a loved one that they're trying to save. And that's going to be his legacy. Like his legacy isn't going to be like the 40 years of what he was. It's going to be the 10, 15 years of who he became.
Yep.
And there's power in that. And there's a message in that. You know?
Yes.
I hope we're out of time. Gee, this is enough. And I wasn't paid for this. Like, this is just me in my booth, and I didn't sign up for it. So
thank you for your time.
Never again.
Thank you for your time. This has been an excellent debrief. I learned a lot about you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
You knew all this stuff.
Is there anything else?
No, I hope you pay my day rate.
Is there anything that all right. Cheers.
I don't... is this... Oh, that's nice.
If you take anything out of that conversation, I hope it's the part about not giving up on someone. I specifically remember those days when the family was going through that process of having the conversations with Melvin's father, and to see it on the other side now is, as he said, just such a testament to believing in someone, but more than that, believing that people can do better, that people can change, and that there is hope at the other end. So that is really the main reason that I wanted to share that conversation, because the battle is not over for someone that is going through addiction, and I understand that through conversations with loved ones and with my father-in-law, but I think, understanding also that it's a joint journey, right, with the family is so key. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And if you like this episode, let me know. I would love to hear your comments and also things that you would love to hear about. So thank you, Family Made, for the partnership, and to everybody involved in this conversation. I'll see you next time.